So, as I'm doing this, I am actually watching the Orlando City versus NYCFC game, which is why you see like a little big blob right around here. But I'm going to try to do this as quick as possible because we got the El Tráfico game in roughly about an hour from now. So, I want to get this over with. This usually take about half an hour to about 40 minutes to do, but yeah, there's going to be 10 games again this weekend, which means that there's going to be 3 teams that is not going to be playing and having a bye week. But we start with Montreal versus Atlanta, and Montreal, of course, have gone 6 out of their last 7 games with at least a win or a draw. While Atlanta themselves have beat DC United 3-1, and you know, I'm not sure if it's crazy to say that maybe Montreal could get a win against Atlanta because they've been in just such a good form lately, and they have shown that so far, not only they can beat the easy team, but they're started to be able to take care against the bigger team. I mean, against the Portland Timbers, they were really taking the task onto Portland, and that was a game that they should have won if their goalkeeper Evan Bush did not just make 2 big howler. But having said that, they are playing against Atlanta, and this is an Atlanta team that is not only good at home, but they're also very good on the road. And I just wonder if that is maybe a little bit... I always wonder with Montreal, with this good winning streak, most of the games that they play has been very easy game, and they have played a couple of tough games, and so far they still won those games. But now they're playing against Atlanta, and Atlanta is a very, very good team, and I wonder how are they going to do in this one. Especially how is this defense going to hold up against this very dynamic kind of Atlanta attack. But we shall see if they can, of course, continue their good streak. And again, if Montreal does lose this one, I'm not going to just say that, well, they have been playing easy team, that's why they've been in this good streak. Montreal has got into this good streak because they take advantage of playing against easy team and winning them, and they're able to almost beat those good team that nobody thought they would beat them. And, they rightfully so deserve to be right above the playoff line, but the question is, can they, of course, make the playoffs this season? And in order for them to make the playoffs this season, they might have to either get maybe a point against big opponent and continue to beat those very easy teams. But moving on into the next one, the Red Bulls take on Columbus. So the Red Bulls, of course, beat DC United 1-0 away, which I, of course, will talk about that later tonight when I do the review for the midweek games. And BWP obviously got his 100th goal in that game too. And Columbus, well, they won 3-2 against Orlando City, but they won it in a very controversial way. And they win it, you could kind of say, in help with the ref giving them a penalty that pretty much everybody agreed that that's not a penalty. I mean, if you're still a person that say that that's not a penalty on RJ Allen there, then I don't know what to say. Like, you got to watch that play over and over again. And, for Columbus, this is definitely going to be tough for them because the Red Bulls, they've been very good at home. And yes, the Red Bulls does have a shorter week this match, and Columbus does have a more of the rest in this game. I still think the Red Bulls should be able to win. I mean, in that game, like I said, I feel like Columbus probably didn't quite deserve that win. But at the same time, it was a win that they really needed. Consider how bad it's been for Columbus and how they're kind of been in a little bit of a free fall again, like they have been in the middle part of this season. So I expect the Red Bulls to win this one. And moving on into the next match, and this is the second leg match between Toronto versus Chicago. And the reason why I said this is the second leg is because they just played each other 7 days ago, and that of course was in Chicago. And this of course is a return leg for TFC. as they play against the Fire game. Last time, TFC won 2-1 in that match. And certainly for TFC, they would definitely want to get a win in this one to get themselves closer to that red line. I think it's now at 8 points that they are behind the team that is above the red line, which is New England. And for Chicago, well, this is going to be tough for them to try to learn from their mistake in the last match against TFC and have to go to TFC now to try to get a result. And it's a big game for both teams too, because TFC, they want to continue to, they need to try to get on a bit of a winning streak if they want to make sure that they get into the playoffs. And for Chicago, they need to stop this bleeding. Like, this has been a really bad run for the Fire. I mean, they have gone, now 5 games without a win? And that was after they gone 5 games with a win. And actually, it's not just 5 games without a win, it's a 5-game losing streak for the Chicago Fire. So, this is definitely not good for them, and certainly the confidence level for them coming into this game is not going to be very good. But they need to try to at least get a win in this, or get a draw in this, because they don't want to be in this free fall any longer, because their playoff hope is just slipping down their hands if they continues this bad kind of run. But the very next one doesn't really have a lot of playoff implication. In fact, I would say this is the garbage derby, because DC United versus Colorado, both are very bad team. And I think it's safe to say that after DC United lost to the Red Bulls in that game against, they lost to the Red Bulls in that midweek game, it's safe to say that this team is not making the playoffs. Like, people that say that maybe DC United can maybe sneak it in because they have all those home games. No. They just lost. And I know it's against the Red Bulls, which, it's a very tough opponent, but they just cannot afford to lose these kind of game at home. And there's going to be tougher opponents than the Red Bulls. I think they still have to play Atlanta and NYCFC, that is DC United. So, it's good that they have a lot of home games, but if you do not win those home games, and I think DC United will have to really be perfect throughout the rest of the way in their home game, and maybe wins some road game to make the playoffs, because this team is just so far behind the playoff picture. And, unfortunately, some people kind of gave them a little bit hope with the fact that in that opening game against Vancouver, in the opening of Audi Field, and how they won that game, some people gave them some hope that maybe they can come back from this and maybe make the playoffs, but it just doesn't seem like it. But the good news is they do play against the Rapids, and the Rapids themselves have once again back into free fall mode, as they are now winless in 4 games. And the Rapids have only won 1 game so far this season on the road, which, if you're a Rapids fan, that's kind of a miracle, considering the fact that the Rapids has been just so bad on the road, not just this season, but for the past 2 seasons. They just cannot win on the road whatsoever. So, this is going to be the battle of bad teams, and whoever, of course, will come out of this with a win probably will give them 3 points, but that's all about it. Both of these teams, I don't think they're going to be making the playoffs this season. But speaking of free fall, Sporting KC. This team is in a free fall right now. This is a team that was in first place for a majority of the season, and now all of a sudden they have only won 1 out of their last 6 games. And it's definitely not going to be easier for them, because they are going to be playing against FC Dallas. And, this is a Dallas team that has been it's been a very kind of under the radar Dallas team, and a team that not a lot of people are talking about them, but they are quietly becoming one of the best teams in the Western Conference. And despite the fact that they did lose 2 of their key players, that is Kellen Acosta and Mauro Diaz, they're still finding ways to try to get victories, and still trying to maybe actually finish the season in the top seed of the Western Conference. And this is a game that Sporting KC need to win if they want to get back to where they are. I mean, this Sporting KC team is actually now in danger of falling into fourth place, and it's hard to believe. Again, they've been in first place for a majority of this season, and I really think the biggest problem for Sporting KC right now is once again the defense. I mean, I talk about how this defense earlier in the season was very kind of spotty and not really kind of a Peter Vermes kind of style of defense that is just absolute lockdown and organized. But in these last couple of games, it has been absolutely shambolic. And in fact, in the last 6 games, I believe, they have conceded 2 or more goals in each game. And during these last 6 games, they have actually conceded almost half the amount of goals that they conceded throughout this whole season. I mean, this, I talk about how earlier in the season they had that defensive woe. Well, this is even worse now. I mean, this is a long period of defensive woes, and you can also say Sporting KC is kind of maybe in a crisis right now because Peter Vermes actually openly throw his team under the bus after that 4-2 loss in the U.S. Open Cup against the Dynamo. I mean, he absolutely ripped apart of his team of how they're not performing and whatsoever, and it's definitely not a good time if you're a Sporting KC fan to be at, and I really think that this is a game that if they do not win, then Sporting KC could be in trouble, and if they continue this free fall, and as crazy as this might sound, they might actually miss the playoffs if they continue this free fall. And unless if they don't show sign that they can finally pick themselves up and get back on track, this team is going to be like FC Dallas of last season, where this team was in majority of the first half of the season in first place, but they had this massive collapse in the second half of the season, and they end up missing the playoffs that year. But meanwhile, moving on into the next one, the Whitecaps take on Minnesota. Another game that have a lot of playoff implication. Although Vancouver just announced that they have sold Alphonso Davies to Bayern Munich, and if you watch my video a couple of days ago, or actually not a couple of days ago, I made it yesterday. I talked about how the Whitecaps are going to keep Davies for the remaining of the season, but once the season is over, they will of course hand him to Bayern Munich to complete this transfer deal, and Vancouver got a lot of money out of Alphonso Davies, and I'm assuming they will use that money as a way to try to rebuild this squad and trying to find a replacement for Davies, because it's pretty clear that this Whitecaps team without Alphonso Davies is like a very below mediocre team. And they're going to be playing against Minnesota, and this is a Minnesota team is just hitting on all cylinder right now. I mean, this is a Loons team that is hungry to make the playoffs, and this is a good opportunity for Minnesota to definitely get a win, because they're playing a team that is going to be battling against them for that playoff spot, and I have a feeling that Minnesota could actually win this one. And it's hard to believe that of all the time that I've seen Minnesota play, it's been very few time I actually say Minnesota can actually win a game on the road. Like, I usually don't give Minnesota any chance on the road, but with how good they've been and how hot they have been lately, this is a good chance for them to get a win. And if they do get a win on the road, then this is step 1 in terms of potentially, or actually not step 1, but step 2 to potentially them actually sneak into the playoff. I mean, step 1 is basically try to win their rest of their home game, which, they don't have a lot of home game left. They only have like 5 home games left this season. But the step 2 is that they need to win some of these road games. And this is one of those that they really need to win if they want to make the playoffs. And if they don't win this, then that could be an issue for Minnesota. And maybe, despite the fact that they were so impressive against LAFC, Yeah, if you don't win your road game, and especially you have a road heavy schedule heading into the second half of the season, then yeah, you're not going to make the playoffs. And it's really sad to say that because I think Minnesota, with the way that they've been playing this season, I think they certainly deserve to be in the playoffs. But next up, well, I'm still not quite sure if I'm actually going to do a Quakes preview on this game because, you know, this Quakes team is done. Like, this team is just clearly done. Our season is clearly done, and really the second half of the season is just either rebuild or start thinking about the future because it's just been absolutely god awful of how it's been in the last couple of seasons. And I'm still waiting for an announcement of Michael Starhay getting his resignation signature out of this team because it's pretty clear that we need a new manager. Like, we desperately need a new manager. And even though I will say that in that Sounders game, we did play much better in terms of the defensive end. And really, the only goal that we conceded is, what do you know, a defensive mistake. But really, that was only the only defensive mistake that we made all night. The goal scoring part is just not there, and it feels like right now it's the goal scoring department that has been having some problem. And it's not a surprise when the goal scoring department is a problem when you have such a defensive manager that is Michael Starhay. I mean, right now, Michael Starhay is not only like Dominic Kittner 2.0, but he's even worse than Dominic Kittner. I mean, he can't even... Not only he's not organizing the defense very well, but he can't organize the attacking threat very well. And the only thing I will say is that we are playing against RSL, and this is a team that have only won one game on the road. And despite the fact that RSL have looked amazing at home and beating some of the big teams like FC Dallas, Sporting KC, this team just cannot win on the road. And I genuinely don't know why they can't win on the road. They're like the Quakes of last season, where they always win their home games, but whenever they go on the road, it's just completely useless. So I'm hoping with RSL, with their trouble on the road, might be finally a time where the Quakes can actually get a win. And keep in mind, we already drew RSL once this season. We drew 1-1 in that road game, and you know, maybe this is finally the time for them to get a win. And I gotta say this, in some way, and I know this might sound crazy, but I kind of don't want the Quakes to win this game because in some way, I feel like the only way this front office, the only way is Fornelli gonna really press the button to sack Michael Starhay is that we need to continue this winless run. Like, I know Fornelli has already said that he will stick with Starhay throughout the end of the season, but it just gets to a point where when you are in an 11-game winless streak and that it doesn't look like there is any signs that winless streak is going to come to an end, any front office and any team in the world would really start to feel the heat and really need to do the right thing, which is sack their manager. And I think that's what Fornelli has to do if we continue this winless run. But then again, I don't want to kind of just say that we want to lose just on purpose, because let's face it, this is not like NBA or MLB or even the NFL where we just can tank the entire year and lose on purpose so we can get a better draft pick. That's not how MLS work. Even though MLS does have their own drafting system, that is not the way it's supposed to work. But if it is a way to get rid of our manager, then maybe I, of course, will take it. But other than that, you know, this is going to be another game that is going to be, I'm assuming it's going to be tough to watch. And, you know, if we get a win, then I'll be happy. But I won't be just going overly celebrate and say that we're going to get our season back on track, because we're not. We are not going to get our season back on track. But next up, Portland. They take on Houston. So Portland is still unbeaten. And in some way, they shouldn't be unbeaten, because Montreal, they really took it to them, and it looked like Portland was going to finally lose their first game after they just had no answer to that Montreal attacking threat. But they got out of jail because Montreal themselves made two very silly mistakes, and they're playing against a Dynamo team that themselves also kind of got robbed in that Union game with that sending off, which I, of course, talked about earlier today. And, for Portland, these last couple of games haven't been very kind of enjoyable. I mean, despite the fact that they're in this very long kind of unbeaten streak right now, they're not really making a lot of ground or making themselves up the table. I mean, they still have a couple of games in hand, but I think the reason why they're not making up the table is that they did have draw a couple of games, and like the last game against Montreal, they really got out of jail in that one. And even going to the U.S. Open Cup, they didn't look good in that U.S. Open Cup game against LAFC. So, Portland has kind of struggled a little bit lately, but they're still unbeaten, so we can't really just say that Portland should be panicking because they're still unbeaten, and that as long as they continue this unbeaten streak, they're not going to be in any threat of actually missing the playoffs. But they are playing against a Houston team that are definitely desperate to try to get into the playoffs, and the Dynamo fans will be really upset about that home game because of that refereeing decision. And I also have heard that they have now been appealing to MLS about Martinez's red card, and that should be repelled. And we'll see if that red card will be repelled in time for this game. And for Houston, if they want to make the playoffs, I really think they need to start winning some home games, and not home games, but road games. And road games has just been always the Achilles heel for the Houston Dynamos. And now that this season they're not as good as they were at home, there is a good chance that the Dynamos might miss the playoffs. And I really don't think this Houston team is very bad. I mean, I think if you look at the teams that's going to miss the playoffs this season, I think Houston might be one of the best in terms of teams that is not going to make the playoffs. But unfortunately, because of the fact that earlier in the season, and if Houston is going to miss the playoffs, I think the reason why they missed the playoffs is because of those games that they just could not close out, and because of those games where they gave up late goals. And if they did not do that, then Houston should be in the playoff position. I mean, you do the math, and all those points that they drop, if you put those points back into their tally right now, they should be in the playoffs right now. So we'll see if they can, of course, get a road win against Portland, although Portland, of course, with this long unbeaten streak, I don't know if it's going to end just this soon, even though they've kind of been in a little bit of a rocky spell. But now moving on into the last two games and into the Sunday game. So first of all, we got the Sounders against NYCFC. The Sounders are unbeaten in 6 of their last 7 games, which is hard to believe considering the fact that I've been always saying that the Sounders are not doing very well, but they're actually doing quite fine. They look like they're trying to replicate what they've been doing for the last 2 seasons, which is having an incredible second half comeback and proving me once again wrong that they are not out of it. I think they're about 7 points behind the red line, and they do have a game in hand over the team that is currently just above the red line. And NYCFC, of course, they have won 7 of the last 8 games, although I have a feeling it could be 8 out of the last 9 games, because as I look right now, it is still 2-0 as they head into the 80th minute between Orlando City and NYCFC. So most likely that's going to be 8 out of 7, but NYCFC does have a long travel ahead of them. They have to travel all the way across the other side of the country for this weekend game, and you know how brutal that is. And certainly the Sounders, I'm assuming they're going to park the bus again. They're going to just give all the possession for NYCFC, and You know, it's gonna look like a one-way traffic kind of game with the way the Sounders play, but they're gonna maybe try to nick a goal or even get a nil result against NYCFC, which I don't see how that's gonna help them if they still think about making the playoffs. I mean, I just don't think that this team is gonna make the playoffs with the way you look at the squad right now, and certainly I know this team has a lot of injury, but this team look really slow. And this team just have no attacking threat whatsoever. I mean, yes, in the last game, Raul Ruidiaz finally scored his goal, which, by the way, that was a very good goal that he scored. But that was because we gave the ball away to the Sounders, that is the Quakes. And, you know, I still don't believe that NYCFC, or not NYCFC, but the Sounders themselves will make the playoffs, and they will make another incredible run like they've been doing for the last 2 seasons. And for NYCFC, they certainly will be. I think they'll definitely want to maybe get a win so that they can stay pace with their neighbor, the Red Bulls, and Atlanta for that Supporters Shield standings. And yeah, we're gonna see how this game is gonna go. And then heading into the last game, and both of these teams are actually gonna be playing today. And as of now, Orlando is, like I said, they are losing 2-0 to NYCFC, which means that most likely this is going to be 1 out of 11 games that Orlando City has now won in their last 11 games. And the Galaxy themselves are unbeaten in 7 games, although it depends on what happened tonight. That unbeaten streak could come to an end if they lose to LAFC. And, you know, for the Galaxy, you know, they certainly have the luxury, the fact that even though they played a midweek game, you know, the midweek game that they play is against LAFC, which is still in the same city for their road game. And for Orlando City, they have to travel all the way across the other side of the country for this game. And, you know, with how Orlando City has played, with the way that they're playing against NYCFC, which is not very good, and the fact that they've been just giving the ball away so much in that game, yeah, I have a feeling the Galaxy could potentially get a win, and even if they do lose this El Tráfico tonight. And speaking of which, I, of course, will be watching that in about 25 minutes, and I hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. I will, of course, do the review for the midweek games after El Tráfico. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you guys next time.